A message from your scribe!
No rescue, no help from anywhere. Surrounded by darkness and dust, trapped for eternity in a hopeless situation with no chance of improvement. This is the fate of those who travel to Kur, Irkala or Kigal. All these names mean one thing: a dark cave located deep underground, where souls descend after their life on earth ends. Mesopotamian religious systems were much less forgiving to believers compared to later religions that would conquer the world eventually. In the realm of Ereshkigal or Nergal, there are no judgments of souls, no distinguishing between good and evil. There is only darkness, all-encompassing and just, touching everyone equally. It can be argued that summoning spirits that have dwelt for centuries in this unfriendly land is at least imprudent. After all, the topos of restless spirits haunting the world of the living didn't come from anywhere. Yet, it is precisely in Mesopotamia that we encounter traces of the dark art called necromancy. The term Ker carries two distinct meanings in the Sumerian language, which, however, intertwine with each other. Firstly, it signifies the peak, or simply a mountain. As the only mountain range relatively close by was the Zagros Mountains, the world beyond them appeared unknown and distant to the inhabitants of Mesopotamia. Therefore, Ker was also associated with far-off, unknown lands. The second meaning was mentioned earlier, but for a reminder, it pertains to the world of the dead. So, why do we link the underworld of the deceased with mountains? Similar to the language itself, in some Sumerian myths, mountains are equated with foreignness, with another world. This likely stems from the fact that people of Mesopotamia were not accustomed to such sights on the horizon. The overwhelming majority of Sumerians, as well as the peoples inhabiting the Mesopotamia region later on, they usually had dry and flat wastelands in front of them, or occasionally a view obscured by reeds growing along the banks of Tigris and Euphrates. Although there is no definitive evidence for this, we think that Mesopotamians believed that the entrance to the underworld was located somewhere in the east. The world of the dead is unknown. The world beyond the mountain peaks also remains undiscovered. Therefore, it is precisely there that we should seek the gates to the Ker. So, how precisely does the underworld look like? We learn this from the Epic of Gilgamesh. He turned me into a dove, so that my arms were feathered like a bird. Seizing me, he led me down to the house of the darkness, the dwelling of Irkala, to the house where those who enter do not come out, along the road of no return, to the house where those who dwell do without light, where dirt is their drink, their food is of clay, where like a bird they wear garments of feathers, and light cannot be seen. They dwell in the dark, and upon the door and the bolt there lies dust. Some translators or editors claim that the Epic of Gilgamesh presents a Sumerian version of hell, but this is not entirely true. Although the description you just heard does not portray Ker as the most welcoming place to spend leisure time for all eternity, it is far from being hell. The people of Mesopotamia imagined the world of the dead as the complete opposite of heaven. The world of the dead represents darkness, while heaven represents light. However, we cannot speak of a classical dualism here, because between heaven and the underworld there is still the world of the living. The world of the dead is a place that in spiritual sense seemed distant from the living, but in reality it was right under their feet, hidden beneath the ground. Literary descriptions like the one mentioned earlier paint it in gloomy colors, referring to it as a land of no return or the house from there is no return. Nevertheless, there are also stories that soften these dark visions. In the Sumerian epic The Death of Namu, spirits of the deceased are described as celebrating and participating in a feast upon the arrival of the king in the underworld. By the way, even the sun god Shamash visited the underworld every day during his endless journey through the space. So, the very concept of hell as a place inhabited by demonic beings, the devil, or other terrifying creatures where souls are subjected to the endless torment and which have developed so prominently during the Middle Ages does not align with the Mesopotamian world of the dead at all. This concept was created long after the Epic of Gilgamesh reached the Mesopotamian bookstores. The underworld of the dead can be frightening, but it is not one-dimensional as, for example, the Christian hell, and it is also more egalitarian. All the deceased enter it, regardless of their good or bad deeds in their earthly life. So, how does one enter the world of the dead? It is not as easy as it may seem. Mesopotamians did not believe in the concept of immortality, or at least they considered the pursuit of it to be futile, a point emphasized well by the Epic of Gilgamesh itself. Death itself only marked the end of an earthly life, but people continued their journey as Giddim. In simplest terms, this word refers to the spirit of a deceased person who, to reach Ker, must undertake a painstaking journey. The success of this journey, however, depended on those who remained in the world of living. A proper burial and mourning for the deceased were essential to finding oneself in Mesopotamian Underworld. Above all, the deceased had to be buried. The fate of those Giddim whose bodies did not receive a proper burial was dire. And the worst fate of all awaited those whose bodies had disintegrated, whether through burning, execution, or as a result of a fire. Such bodies could not be buried. Literary sources do not provide us with detailed information about what happened to these spirits, but it is certain that their souls could never reach the underworld. It was believed that they ascended to the sky with the smoke rising from the fire. In addition to burial, ritual mourning and prayer for the deceased were incredibly important. Particularly crucial for the Mesopotamians were the first days after death, because it was during this time that the soul embarked on the journey to Ker. If all the rituals were performed correctly, the spirit could undertake its journey and enter the realm of the dead. Ninazu, the son of the goddess Ereshkigal, guided the spirit to the gates of the underworld. On entering the House of Dust, everywhere I looked there were royal crowns gathered in heaps. Everywhere I listened it was the bearers of crowns, who in the past had ruled the land, but who now served Anu and Enlil cooked meats, served confections, and poured cool water from water skins. In the House of Dust that I entered, there sat the high priest and acolyte. There sat the purification priest and ecstatic. There sat the anointed priests of the great gods. There sat Itana, there sat Samukan, there sat Ereshkigal, the queen of the netherworld. The gates to the underworld did not only open inward, and the living knew this very well. Spirits retained the needs of a living person, primarily feeling hunger and thirst. In Ker there was complete darkness, and there was neither water nor food. The deceased, forgotten by their families, sustained themselves on dust and mud. Some researchers believe that the high birth rate was driven not so much by fear of old age, but by concerns about the future in the underworld. In any case, in the absence of offerings from the families, a spirit was condemned to a beggarly existence in the afterlife. Thirsty spirits could become restless and venture out of Ker back into the world of the living to haunt people. The cause of their unrest might not only be their family's forgetfulness, but also the spirit's desire to make amends for the wrongs committed in life. At other times, a Giddim might choose to return to the world of the living to seek revenge on their tormentor. The gracious goddess Ereshkigal granted permission for such spirits to leave Ker. However, it also happened that Giddim were simply bored or unhappy in the netherworld. They would clandestinely leave the realm of the dead and become a nuisance to the living, most often to their own relatives. Spirits could enter the body through the ear and lead to what the ancients called possession and which now is called mental illness. The practice of magic was closely linked to the ancient medicine. Therefore, alongside traditional methods of treatment for those times, such as primitive surgery and herbal remedies, Mesopotamian physicians relied on the powers of magic. The magic has mainly survived in lexical material. Incantations and spells in various languages often seem like complete gibberish. However, others provide a fairly clear picture of how to prepare for such exorcism. Finally, we come to necromancy and the people who practiced it. In Mesopotamia, those who summoned the dead were called Sha'etemi, which literally means spirit summoners. Necromancy was known and practiced in Mesopotamia for thousands of years. The resurrected spirit could be questioned about the future, although it was considered a very dangerous activity, because there was a risk that the restless spirit could turn against the summoner. In many discovered texts related to necromancy, a skull often played a crucial role. Sometimes it served only as an ingredient in magical potions, but at other times it served as a medium for communication with the spirit of the deceased. According to one tablet, the skull and a symbolic figurine of the deceased should be anointed with a rather enigmatic mixture of oil, dust, ground quail bones and crickets to even begin the incantations. After those preparations, one must wait until night and then proceed to recite the spells, which sound as follows. May he bring up a ghost from the darkness for me. May he put life back into the dead man's limbs. I call upon you, skull of skulls. May he who is within the skull answer me, O Shamash, who brings light in the darkness. Spirits were only summoned in exceptional circumstances when it was necessary to converse with them about matters of life and death. There are few examples that depict the actual summoning of a spirit and conversation with it. The most famous of them comes, of course, from the Epic of Gilgamesh, but more precisely from the myth Gilgamesh, Enkidu and the Netherworld. According to this myth, Gilgamesh lost his magical drum, which made people serve him and fulfill his all desires when he played it. Thanks to the drum, he could seduce any woman in the city and compel all men to work for him. However, the magical instrument fell into the netherworld, and Gilgamesh sat despondent at the gates of the world of the dead. At the time, his good friend Enkidu decided to enter the netherworld to retrieve the instrument. However, he was never supposed to return from there. Sometime later, Gilgamesh meets his friend once again and receives an account of the afterlife from Enkidu, who returned from the dark realm of Ereshkigal, where he had gone to recover his friend's lost belongings. Nergal opened the gates to the underworld to release Enkidu. Although it is not explicitly stated in the epic, it is apparent that while Enkidu entered the underworld alive, the entity with whom Gilgamesh converses is no longer his friend, but a Gidim, a spirit who returns to convey information to Gilgamesh about world of the dead. Listen carefully, because alongside Gilgamesh, the scribe, translator and few others, we are the only people who will learn what care looks like. As soon as Nergal opened the hole in the ground, the spirit of Enkidu emerged from the earth like the wind. We embraced, kissed and began to converse with each other in sorrow and sighs. Tell me, my friend, tell me the law of the land you have seen. I won't tell you, my dear friend, I won't tell you. If I were to tell you the law of the land I have seen, you would sit down and weep. Then let me sit and weep. My friend, you see, the body that you were touching is now being devoured by worms like an old rag. The body of Enkidu which you were touching has turned to clay. It is filled with dust. If you enjoyed watching the video, please consider leaving a like and subscribing to the channel.